It's live in New York with me, Alex Belfield, here on the BBC, and we've come in the quiet off Times Square. It's insane out there today, and I'm joined by Adam Pascal. Thank you for talking to us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Now, you're in a wonderful musical called Aida, and it's the Elton John, Tim Rice musical. It's much hype, much talk about, and it is a great show. What's it like to be in it?
It's a lot of fun. I've been blessed with being in two extremely successful musicals in a row. The first one being Rent, and now this one. And it's, getting the chance to sing Elton's music has been a dream of mine my whole life. I've grown up singing his songs, so the fact that I get to be in a successful musical singing original songs written by him for this piece has been a dream come true for me.
What do you think you've got that puts you above the rest and makes you special?
Well, I think it's probably my style of performance. I grew up listening to heavy metal and hard rock bands like Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and all these bands. And when I started singing, those were the guys I tried to emulate. And those guys have really strong, powerful voices, but they're not your quote unquote legit type of theater voices. And so my voice just developed into sort of this strange hybrid of a rock and roll voice and sort of a dramatic type of theater voice as well. And I think I just sort of come at it with a little bit more of a naturalistic approach in terms of my performance than a lot of your trained actors and singers.
Now, this is basically an exaggerated love story and a wonderful love story, isn't it, really?
Absolutely, yeah. It's based on the opera by Verdi, and it's just it's this sort of tragic love triangle between Aida and my character Radames and the Egyptian princess Amneris. And as with every tragedy, hopefully the audience leaves with a lump in their throat and a smile on their face.
Because it makes you laugh and cry in this musical. That's the wonderful thing about it, isn't it?
Well, we certainly hope so. Every audience is different, obviously, but the intention is certainly to give the audience the full spectrum and range of emotions that we can.
Now, you're right in the centre of Times Square. If you stand in Times Square, you can't miss the theatre. What is it like? This must be the pinnacle for your career, isn't it? I mean, where can you go from here? This is it, isn't it, really? This must be the dream.
Well, in terms of performing in musical theatre, certainly Broadway and the West End are the two pinnacles to achieve. But, I think like a lot of other people who do musical theater, we have other aspirations in addition to doing Broadway. And I write and perform my own music, and I have a record out now, and I'm working on songs for my next record. And so I think that my career aspects are certainly a little bit broader than just doing theater. I'd like to produce. I've produced a successful off-Broadway show, and I'd like to continue to produce, hopefully, an on-Broadway musical one day, and like I said, continue with my own music and also continue to do theater. I think that there's no reason why you can't have a multifaceted career in entertainment.
Now, you launched Rent, didn't you? And it was a huge success over here and equally a success in the West End. Which did you prefer, doing it here or in London?
Well, I have to say I think doing it here was a little bit more exciting only because it was brand new. And when we went over to the West End, there was a little bit of an expectation, and people were sort of looking for proof of this huge American show and why is it so good and come over here and prove yourself. And so I think the audiences in the West End were a little bit more difficult to win over. They were fabulous, but I think we had to work a little bit harder. I think here in the States, the show was a phenomenon, and it just sort of took off. And so I think our workload was a little bit easier over here.
We'll talk about the musical again in a minute in your career, but at this point, the point of this programme is about New York and how it's recovered after September the 11th. Were you around when the tragedy hit the World Trade Center?
I was. I live just outside of the city, but I'm a New Yorker born and bred, so it was the day I don't think any of us will ever forget. I just remember sitting there with my wife watching on television. I honestly think I was glued to the television for probably 24 hours straight. I could not stop watching it, as I think a lot of people couldn't stop watching it. And was extremely horrific, but it was so surreal that it took days for the reality of it to sink in. It was, which again I think probably was the case with a lot of people. And then we had to come back to work, 2 days later, and none of us were particularly happy about coming back to work because we felt that it was too soon, and we should be allowed to mourn for a little bit longer. But after we actually came back, it turned out to actually be the best thing for all of us and for the audience as well. People wanted to forget, and people wanted to be entertained, and they wanted to be taken to a place where they didn't have to think about what was going on outside the theater. So I think coming back to work actually did us a huge service as well as the audience.
Were you ever scared of getting back on stage? I mean, you're in a huge arena. New York was the target. Nobody knew what was going to happen next. Did you ever get scared?
I didn't really get scared because security immediately in the city was so heightened after the attacks. I mean, there were the warplanes flying over the city, and so I didn't think of that. I didn't, there wasn't a fear factor involved at all. My assumption was that if something else was going to happen, it was going to be something much larger on a much broader scale than like the World Trade Center, and I didn't think that people would sort of be targeting, Broadway. I didn't think that was a likely target for terrorism.
How was it going back on stage the first time? I mean, how did you feel? Were you worried how you were going to be received?
Absolutely. Well, certainly we were concerned if there was even going to be an audience, which there was. We had a meeting right before the show. The cast had a meeting, and a lot of people didn't want to do the show. And it basically came down to, well, if you don't feel that you can do the performance, then don't do it. And, if there's enough of us to do the show, we're going to do it. And it was really tough. It was tough, and it was emotional. But, I sort of looked at it as this is our cross to bear at this particular moment in time. Actors have it easy. Actors are pampered, and actors are usually spoiled brats, and so this is our time to sort of step up and do something and prove your worth a little bit, and try and do something substantial and do something helpful to the people coming to see the show.
And I think people really did need relief, didn't they? And a way out.
They did, absolutely. And the audiences immediately after 9/11 were incredibly appreciative. And we would sing America the Beautiful at the end of the show after the curtain call. And, I thought that was like the goofiest thing to do. But after we did it, the first night, it was so cathartic for everybody. The people in the audience were crying. People on stage were crying. And I never thought that patriotism is something you take for granted, especially here in this country. And most people aren't patriotic and don't ever think about it because, it's just this is where you live, and nobody ever thinks about loving your country. And so there was a real wave of patriotism since then that has come across everyone, New Yorkers and Americans.
Do you think New York is now back to normal, or as near to normal as it will ever be?
Maybe not as it will ever be, but it's definitely gotten very close to being back to normal. People are back in town. People are going to see Broadway shows. People are going to museums and movie theaters and coming to Times Square, as is evident today on this St. Patrick's Day. So I'm extremely happy that it takes me an extra 20 minutes to get home at night because there's so much traffic.
It's been great talking to you today. Now, you have got this new album out. Can we play a track from it?
Sure. It's called Model Prisoner, and it's on a record label called Shikaboom Records, which is a label based out of here in New York, and they're sort of trying to bridge a gap between musical theater and pop music. So, absolutely. Play it away.
Okay, which song would you like us to play?
Oh, that's a good question. How about a song called Model Prisoner? It's the title track of the album.
Okay, this is Live in New York with me, Alex Belfield. Adam Pascal, thank you very much for talking to us today.
Thank you, my pleasure.